Hello, everyone. Great to see you again. So I think we have talked quite a few topics on the billing recently. It's getting a bit boring, and I think we can switch on to some of the framework topics, and that's why I decided to talk about this user interface today. Okay, so user interface, I think we can break it down into multiple tools we can use. So the main one is the UI map, where we can use the HTML to design the user interface. Or we have this BPA scripts, which can design the steps for user for kind of form-based user interface. But today I think we mainly focus on the UI map, and so we will touch upon this UI hint as well. Break it down to 5 sections. So we'll do an overview and then look at HTML. We will look at how the HTML and the data, which is presented in XML format, actually works together. And then we look at the service script, how that can be used within user interface, and at last we have a look at this UI hint. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, mainly in the system, if we want to design a page, if we want to, let's say, customize a page layout, because if you want to design just the interface, you could be using objects like a portal or zone for search, etc. But if you want a customized view or customized form to enter or change data, then normally what we use is UI map. So UI map actually is broke down into 2 different UI maps. One is for display, where you show the data on a page when you view the record, and the other one is the maintenance. That's for creating a new record, change the record, etc. BPA script, as we mentioned, is actually extensive use of UI map, but it is more, let's say, it's more used as a guided process. So if you want to design things like a form in a few steps, you want to have a user interaction with the interface in a stepped format, then probably BPA script, but it's not very often used. I've seen mainly it's UI map. Okay, part 2. Right, I put these 3 things together because they actually works together. So in in the UI map, you can actually define the page using HTML, and very often it is used together with CSS and also the JavaScript. CSS is the one which define the layout, the format, etc. And JavaScript is more for functions defined to perform certain task. on the page. And I mean, I don't have to introduce this technology. Has been there for years. And I think these three are perfect to sit together to create a dynamic page and fit most of the purpose in the interface. Okay, so I put some logos together. HTML is mainly a head section and then a body section for showing the content. You can use table tags, paragraph, etc. in HTML. CSS is basically based on a particular element or type of element. You can define what is the font, color, etc. And then JavaScript is similar to Java syntax. It's basically used to create allow some dynamic logic for running and dynamic formatting. So over here it looks like it's doing something around creating a table directly, a list of elements on the page. So I don't want to talk too much about this because I mean today we have ChatGPT, so if you want to write code, you can utilize ChatGPT, which is the quickest way of fixing these things. Yeah. So, okay, section 3, I want to talk about HTML and XML, how the data and the page works together. Okay, so over here, we have two screenshots, and on the top, that is HTML, and the bottom is business object schema. So actually, for every UI map, you can define the schema, and also you can define the HTML. Okay, so there's two sections which you can specify, and normally one UI map is sitting on one BO, but that doesn't mean the schema only have the business object, but you can also bring in functions like business service you want to use into the schema at the point where you want to call a business service on the within the HTML. That can be achieved where the data would actually be recorded on the schema for the display or logic to run in the HTML or the JavaScript. So over here, the first section on the top contains the HTML. So we can see, for example, we're using some of the elements from the base product, which is called Aura label and Aura field. So these elements are basically looking at within the schema, there is a conservation program and description. Over here, we can see the conservation program description is actually called conservation program 10. So on the label, it will just show 10. It will actually show what is on the metadata. So if the description, let's assume it's just called description, then we'll show description, and our field will show the value, which is conservation program 10. Okay, so it works together with the BO, with the UI map schema loading up all the values normally how it load up value is not just through the business object, but also you could define JavaScript to load up the additional information you want, or you can create a pre-processing service script in the BO algorithm, which can populate all these information. Okay, so once we have the schema populated, the HTML page just load them up and then show in a way as how the HTML is trying to show. Right, so there's a couple of fields we have seen before. So over here, the map fields, MD field. I'm not sure if I have explained this before, but I think it's good to go through some of the schema elements, and then make sure we understand what it means. So map field is actually means for this taxpayer ID element, the value where it will be stored in database. And when you say it's map field, normally that is a column in the database. Now, in this case, if this is a schema for one business object, it is per ID on the main table. Okay, so it could be on the subtable as well. If that's the case, it will be specified in a different way. But normally this means on the main table there is a field called per ID. An MD field is actually something called the metadata field. Now, metadata field doesn't need to exist in database. It is only a field where it will define the behavior of this field when the data is loaded up. It can, well, I guess most of them will be based on the actual field, but it doesn't have to be, right? Because in the metadata field, you can define what is the label, what is the type, length, etc. It doesn't have to follow the database. For example, if you want to store a number on the database into a column which is a number, but you want to show as a string rather than format it. So, we have, say, 100,000, right? 100,000 in UK will be written as 100, comma, and then another 30. If you store as a number, and then if your metadata field is also a number, by default, if it's UK format, it will show with the comma in the middle. But what you can do is you can define this metadata field as a string. So if you define it as a string, it will show as a string. So it will show the number without the comma in the middle. Okay, so this is one of the tricks you can do because normally we don't change database, but we can change metadata. Similarly, the email is mapped to a email ID field. Okay. Right, on this one, let's look. The first one is suppress equal to true. Now, suppress equal to true, it means if there's no value, it won't be shown on the screen. Okay. And there is private equal to true. It means there is a field, but it won't be shown on the screen as well. It's only used for some maybe dependency purpose or dependent field purpose. But if you don't want to show in the UF map, you put private equal to true. Now on the right hand side, I can see this empty field, which is threshold. Now this one is a bit different because this one, it is mapped to a child table where the child table is CI underscore per char. And the characteristic is THRHLD, which is probably threshold, and it's stored in the ad hoc char val. Now, I think I don't remember if I mentioned that before. So for characteristic, we have different types of characteristics. We have just a characteristic to store a particular value or a string, or we have predefined characteristics. We could have characteristic for foreigner key. Okay, so all of these are actually stored in different places. Now for ad hoc char val, mainly it is used for a string, so there is no defined values. If it is predefined value, it is normally mapped to the field called char val. Okay. And for foreigner key, it's another field, which I think it's called foreigner key val. Now, in most of these characteristic tables, you will see another field populated with same value called search char val. This is how the system actually search for them. But we need to be very careful because for some of the table, the value, because sometimes we don't know what type it is when we query it, so we just use search char val to get the values. But you cannot use or rely on search char val all the time. For some of the tables, for example, say person, the search char val is normally capitalized, where the actual value in different columns, they might be lowercase. Okay, so we have to, that's why we have to, it depends on the case, but normally we need to know what is the type up front before we query them. Okay, now come down the left bottom. So this is the row map child. Okay, so we already talked about that. It's basically just the mapping to a child table. And then this okay, so there's a obligation ID basically mapped to the XML, which is in the club data area, and then it has a label. Now this label can be used similar to the MD field, where it can show, if we use Aura label, then this will be shown in the UI. Right, moving on to the service script. So I think in service script we can look at, there are different use of service script. I'm just going to talk about 3 cases, which is quite useful. Now the first one is the action zone. So in your implementation, you must be seeing some pages where you can see the record of the system, the object, but you also, on the top of it or somewhere in the page, you are able to transition or have some buttons there where you can call actions. Okay, so that action zone is where you can define which action you can perform and how they should be laid out. Now, in this case, the service script will be responsible to retrieve the information based on the business object setting. And very often, in the business object, when you see individual life cycle status, there is a next state transition, and you can define either it's a system or system user. System actually means it can only be transitioned by for example, algorithm or batch job. If it is system and the user, that can be used in, it will be defined in this service script to allow the button to be shown. So you can click on that button and do the transition manually. Okay, so that's what the service script for action zone is for. Now the second one, so use a pre-processing service script if the maintenance UI map require additional logic. Well, so what we are saying here is if a UI map is sitting on top of a BO, the BO data is loaded. But what about the other information if you want them to be shown on the screen when it loads up? We can use a pre-processing script. Normally, it is easier than implementing the logic in JavaScript, because in JavaScript you still have to call some service to get data up. But in service script, in service script, it is more flexible, and you can utilize business service, etc., BO object as data area. So it is more flexible to work out which data is required and how to load them up. Last one, display map. Okay, so for display map, there are some information not sitting with the business object, but you still want to show that in the display. Now, here is the display UI map service script useful. They don't store the information with the object, but they just load up the additional reference. Okay. Okay, UI hint. Right, I think there are a lot of information on UI hint, and I'm not going to talk in details how to write or how to build your schema for UI hint. So basically, what UI hint is trying to do is, if you don't have additional logics and you just want to show the elements which is available with the business object, for example, now you don't have to create a UI map, because create a UI map, that means HTML additional code. You can just decorate your BO schema in a particular way so that the system actually understands how these data should be displayed, both in the maintenance UI map and display UI map. And that saves a lot of time. And I think for a lot of cases, you don't actually have to have a maintenance UI map specifically designed. You can just use the elements, whatever is in the business object. So it is very useful, and it is really quick to build and to test. Okay, so I strongly advise, if you are working in the area of UI, try to learn this. It's gonna save you a lot of time. Right. So that is everything. Thank you very much, and see you next time.